My name is Jordan Wells. I'm 51 years old. For more than 2 decades, I gave my life to a logistics company that I helped build from the ground up. I wasn't the founder, but I might as well have been. I designed systems, brought in clients, mentored new hires, and held things together when others were falling apart. I never asked for a spotlight. I asked for consistency, respect, and when the time came, a fair chance to lead. But when that moment finally arrived, my boss, Howard Langston, looked me in the eye, smiled, and handed my promotion to someone else, his 26-year-old son. His name was Travis. Fresh out of business school, still green behind the ears, with more gel in his hair than experience in his hands. I had trained this kid in the summer, showed him how inventory flow worked, how to balance contracts, how to speak to truck drivers without sounding entitled. I'd corrected his spreadsheets and smoothed over his temper. I treated him like a nephew, and when the operations director role opened, the position I'd prepared for over 15 years, Howard gave it to him without blinking. Then, as if to soften the blow, he called me into his office and said the words I'll never forget. "Jordan, I think it's time you took some space. Travis needs room to lead." That's how they dressed it up. Not a demotion, not even a thank you, just space, followed by a gentle push out the door. No scandal, no angry exit, just a well-timed layoff, dressed in corporate language and fake appreciation. I remember looking around that office one last time, seeing the framed awards I helped win, the whiteboard with half my notes still on it, and realizing they didn't even bother to erase me. They thought I'd just vanish. But I didn't fight. I didn't beg. I packed my things, shook a few hands, and walked out without a sound. That was the last day anyone saw me in that building, but not the last time they felt me. Because what Howard and Travis didn't understand was this: while they were busy claiming titles, I was the one who built the map. And now that they'd pushed me off the edge, I had no reason to protect them from falling. I went home that night and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and nothing but silence. I stared at a blank notebook for hours, and then I began to write, not a resignation, not a letter, but a blueprint, not for revenge, for replacement, for something better, stronger, and unshakable. They thought they'd cleared the way by removing me. What they didn't realize was I was the foundation, and without me, that entire structure was already starting to crack. After 2 decades inside that company, I didn't just understand the business. I was the business. I knew which vendors always delivered late, which clients were hanging by a thread, which contracts were held together with favors instead of value. I knew the weak spots Howard ignored and the lies Travis believed. But more importantly, I knew the people, the ones in the warehouses, the dispatchers, the drivers, the real backbone of operations. I had earned their trust, not with titles, but with time. I spent my first 2 weeks out of work reconnecting quietly. No mass emails, no dramatic phone calls, just coffee, lunch, a few casual conversations with the right people. And what I heard confirmed what I suspected. Travis was already struggling. He tried to run the place like a spreadsheet, not a system of people. He ignored the advice of veterans, cut corners on safety, made decisions based on ego, not efficiency. And worse, he was bleeding relationships with suppliers faster than he could replace them. Meanwhile, I started something on the side. Nothing big, just a consulting LLC. One name, one logo, no flash. I didn't advertise. I didn't need to. The first 3 clients came through referrals. All 3 had worked with me years ago. "I don't know what you're doing now, Jordan," one of them said, "but we could use your brain over here." That was all I needed to hear. I didn't rebuild by pushing back. I rebuilt by being available, excellent and silent. Howard and Travis didn't even know I had resurfaced. They were too busy trying to salvage their image, putting out fires that hadn't even started when I was there. I watched from a distance as the firm's stock performance stalled, morale dropped, turnover rose. A few long-time employees retired early, but I knew better. They were getting out before it collapsed. And then came the call I didn't expect, but wasn't surprised by. One of the company's largest clients, a freight giant I had personally onboarded years ago, called me, not to catch up, not to reminisce, but to ask, "Jordan, are you available to take this contract if we decide to walk?" I told them I'd have to check my bandwidth. In truth, I'd been preparing for this moment since the night I was fired. They thought they owned the room because they held the title, but they forgot something critical. Authority isn't who signs the checks, it's who everyone calls when things start breaking. And in their silence, in their absence, everyone started calling me. I didn't return to the industry with noise. I returned with precision. The moment that client officially terminated their contract with Howard's firm, I had the paperwork ready. My team, small but sharp, stepped in with zero downtime. We handled the transition flawlessly. That client alone covered the operating costs for my new business for the next 6 months. And just like that, I wasn't rebuilding, I was rising. Word spread, as it always does in industries built on trust. 2 more clients reached out within weeks. Both had grown tired of Travis's arrogance, his inability to listen, and the instability creeping into once stable operations. One quietly admitted, "We stayed with them out of habit, but you were the one we trusted." That was the moment I realized I hadn't just built relationships, I had built loyalty. Meanwhile, I started hearing stories from inside the old company. Distributors walking away, systems crashing under poorly managed upgrades, confusion over standard protocols. Travis had tried to modernize everything without understanding what any of it was for. He was running a ship with no map, and the crew had started to abandon deck. Still, I said nothing publicly. I didn't gloat. I didn't throw stones. I just kept building. I brought on 3 former colleagues, people I knew were sharp, honest, and tired of being overlooked. I offered them something Howard never did: autonomy, equity, and respect. They jumped without hesitation. We didn't just match my old firm's workflow. Within 4 months, we were outpacing them. Not in size, but in results, in reputation, in trust. One day, I passed Howard's company building. I saw the parking lot nearly empty, unlike the buzzing energy it used to carry when we ran it with integrity and grit. There was a for lease sign hanging near one of the delivery bays. I didn't feel pride. I didn't feel anger. I just felt still. What had once felt like betrayal now looked like confirmation. They had fired me thinking I was dead weight, but I had been the spine. It was never about revenge. It was about restoration. And now that I had quietly taken back the very clients, trust and power they tried to strip from me, I understood something deeper. Winning doesn't always look like a trophy. Sometimes it looks like peace. It was a rainy Tuesday when he showed up. Howard Langston, standing in the lobby of my new office, like a man who had just realized he'd knocked on the wrong door. I watched him through the glass wall as he shifted awkwardly, holding a drenched umbrella and scanning the room that now buzzed with quiet purpose. My assistant looked at me for a signal. I nodded once, slow and deliberate. Let him wait. 5 minutes later, I invited him in, not because I needed anything from him, but because I wanted him to see what dignity looks like when it's been forged through silence. He sat across from me at the conference table, taking in the room. The client files, the award plaques, the clean whiteboard with actionable plans, everything he once had, but couldn't hold on to. He cleared his throat, tried to summon that old tone of authority, but it came out brittle. "Jordan," he started, I didn't expect you to land on your feet so quickly. I let the silence linger. Let him feel how different the air was here. Finally, I said, "That's the difference between building and inheriting. One stands, the other stumbles." He flinched, but said nothing. Then came the ask. "Travis is stepping back," he admitted. "We've lost a few key contracts. I was wondering if there's any room for collaboration." It was almost surreal, watching the man who discarded me now trying to crawl back into relevance. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just leaned forward and said what he never expected to hear. "Howard, you didn't just fire me, you fired the future. And I've already built it." He left shortly after, humiliated but still wearing the mask of professionalism. As he walked out, I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. The man who once thought power came from ownership had been forced to learn that real power lives in trust, in respect, and in the quiet work no one sees until it changes everything. That evening, I stood at my window watching the lights of the city below, phone in hand, reading another client inquiry. They were coming in faster now, organic, solid, steady. I wasn't chasing anything anymore. Everything that mattered was chasing me. In the months that followed Howard's visit, my business didn't just grow, it matured. What started as a quiet comeback had become something far greater, a standard. We didn't cut corners, we didn't chase numbers, we built trust by delivering over and over, while the rest of the industry scrambled to rebrand failure as innovation. And through it all, I stayed grounded in one truth. Real legacy doesn't beg to be seen. It simply outlasts what was fake. I never made a public statement about what happened, no exposé, no revenge story dressed up as a LinkedIn post. My silence said everything. Those who mattered knew the truth, and those who didn't weren't worth explaining it to. People in the industry began using phrases like, "Jordan runs a different kind of firm." That was the highest compliment I could have received. It meant they noticed, even if I never demanded to be noticed. Howard's company, meanwhile, was dissolving piece by piece. By the end of the fiscal year, they'd filed for restructuring. The building lease wasn't renewed. Travis reportedly moved to another state, chasing something else to put his name on. I didn't celebrate. I didn't attend the auction when their old office furniture went up for sale. I had no desire to pick at their remains. I had already moved far beyond them. I spent my weekends mentoring young professionals, quietly, one-on-one. Not just about logistics or strategy, but about honor, about what it means to keep your head when the room turns on you, about how to walk away from noise and rebuild with silence as your hammer. They listened, not because I was the loudest, but because I had lived it and survived it. Every now and then, I would pass by the shell of my old office building. The sign was gone, the windows dark. It looked like a memory, unfinished and untended. I didn't feel anger, I didn't feel pride. I felt distance. That world had once tried to reduce me to a number, a line item, and now I had become something they could no longer touch. The proof that stillness is not weakness, and that being overlooked is sometimes the greatest gift of all. My name is Jordan Wells. I'm 51 years old, and I no longer work for titles. I work for truth. I lead with it, build with it, and leave it behind in everything I touch. They fired me to make space for someone else, but I used that space to build something they never saw coming, my legacy. There's a kind of peace that only comes after you've been betrayed and chose not to retaliate, but to rebuild. Not from bitterness, but from wisdom. That's the peace I wake up with now. No alarms, no anxiety, just purpose. The kind that runs deeper than profit margins or public approval, because what I've built since they fired me isn't just a company, it's a philosophy, a quiet proof that those who are cast aside with dignity can return with power. My firm now leads national accounts, ones that once sat in Howard's portfolio. But more than the numbers, it's the respect that tells me everything. Former competitors now ask for collaboration. University programs invite me to speak to their students, and every handshake I offer is rooted in something real, earned, unshakable. I don't just offer logistics, I offer clarity, and people can feel it. I've never spoken to Travis again. I heard through someone that he tried launching a startup. It failed. Burned out within 6 months. They say he blamed everyone else. That makes sense. He was raised in a world that handed him titles without teaching him weight. I learned to carry weight long before I was ever given recognition for it. That's why I'm still standing. Sometimes I sit at the edge of my desk, watching the sun go down behind the skyline, blueprint rolled out beside me. It hits me. The final design was always mine. They tried to steal the stage, but I owned the structure. They mistook silence for absence. But I was never gone. I was just stepping back to observe where the cracks would show. And when they did, I didn't rush in to rescue. I rose quietly at my pace and let gravity handle the rest. Legacy isn't about being remembered loudly. It's about being remembered accurately. I was never the assistant. I was the architect, the one who knew how everything fit together. Not because someone taught me, but because I had built it brick by brick with my own 2 hands. So yes, my boss fired me to make room for his son. But in doing so, he gave me the space to become everything he never could be: respected, rooted, and free.